I really want to thank everybody. I guess I need to stay in front of the microphone for being here this morning. I know I'm the last in this session, and I'm between you and the break, so I'll throw a lot of ideas out there. I'm not going to touch on what am I supposed to do? This guy? There we go. Thank you. I saw the thing on. I thought it was a radio thing. Okay, so anyway, obviously I'm not a technical person. My background is, but I'm talking about technical aspects. My background is in economics, and then I ended up in industry, working in risk management, and then eventually I decided to go back and get a further degree and got talked into a PhD. So here I am, and I focused on philosophy. So I've been all over the map. But what I want to talk about is empathy. It's something that needs to be addressed, obviously, in a workplace setting, but it also has resonance in terms of AI. And are we building AI in a way and deploying it in a way in which we're continuing to focus on the human-to-human impacts, if you will, in terms of how our discourse and our workplaces are envisioned. So we want to make sure that we're preserving the idea of the human well-being, the presence of the human aspects as we interact within workplaces or within other kinds of stakeholder situations between companies and their customers, their communities, et cetera. So a lot of these aspects are increasingly important. ACM has also been addressing and promoting the idea of a very robust code of ethics and professional conduct in terms of how we engage with AI. And so it's very much important to not only the ideation, the development, the deployment of AI, but also increasingly resonating with the practices, if you will, in terms of how we have sensibilities towards the meanings between human beings, okay? If we're looking at, and I don't want to stray too far here, looking at empowering individuals through the use of artificial intelligence, we need to consider the well-being of others in that aspect, and the fact that we have a human duty to one another to preserve the relationship of human-to-human discourse as well as work-centered activities. Work practices and products need to be included in the design as well as the deployment of AI with empathy. I'm going to throw a quick question out there. Anyone want to give me a quick definition of what you perceive empathy to mean? I'm sorry, I'm a professor. I have to ask questions. Empathy. Yeah, go ahead.
To feel how somebody else would feel in their shoes.
Okay, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right? You know, having that kind of acknowledgement, human to human. Okay, great. Someone else want to throw out a thought or idea? What does empathy mean to you? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
How do I want to be treated?
Okay, yeah. I mean, how you would expect to be treated, right? How you'd want people to respond to you in like kind. Okay, good, good, good. So some of the things that we also think about is having the idea of a meaningful work project, meaningful work environment, a meaningful workplace, if you will, in terms of how we feel that we should develop and engage with empathy within a workplace setting. Some of these come from the original kinds of ways that organizations create themselves, business organizations in particular, developing codes of conduct, codes of ethics, engagement with employees, and creating what's considered meaningful in terms of a work environment, which then gives individuals this sense of, here's a little bit of the psychology and philosophical aspects, a sense of moral worth as an individual within a workplace. Having a meaningful life and duty, we can go to all kinds of philosophical backgrounds in terms of what that might mean. Kant is a German philosopher who spoke somewhat, not obviously about AI, he was running around way before AI was around. I think he was around 1700, so there was no conceptualization there. But part of a philosophical approach to understanding how we engage with others includes this idea of affording meaningfulness to others, recognizing them for their value in and of themselves because they're human beings. So the objective is obviously to look at how do we develop the value for individuals so that they have that sense of self-worth, but also we demonstrate self-interest in others' endeavors. So we're caring, we're exhibiting a connection, if you will, between individuals and ourselves. So where does AI come into play in terms of empathy? It's not something we hear about a lot, but we need to. We need to think about how do we engage AI not just as a process, but how do we engage the humanity of the individuals who are going to be encountering whatever that AI might be, in terms of working conditions, in terms of how we factor compensation. We can come up with all kinds of algorithms to develop compensation tools and tables and mechanisms to reward individuals in the workplace. But are we also considering the meaningfulness of that individual just by virtue of being a human individual in that calculation in terms of compensation? But that would also relate to job design. Are we designing our jobs and the processes and the practices for individual work roles in a way that not only engages with the AI that might be developed and deployed to assist that role, but are we considering that sentient aspect as well? This could also happen with reward and punishment in the workplace. How are we rewarding fellow employees or employees that report to us? What about punishment? Those kinds of things. Is there empathy involved in that if we're tracking individuals in terms of their work progress, process, et cetera, say in a manufacturing setting or in a warehouse setting in terms of workers and that sort of thing? And using AI to get the metrics, but where is the empathy as a result? The other thing would be looking at job satisfaction. How do we reward for that? How do we develop work-life balance aspects so that we're still recognizing the humanity of individuals as well? Some of the conflicting interests that we have is we want to be the first to have something out there. We've done it from the beginning of time, whether it was some kind of product or service. We wanted to be the first business-wise, but we need to also make sure that the profits aren't driving all of our decisions, that we're also looking from an empathetic standpoint. What makes work meaningful? A number of factors. This is just one reference that sort of talks to some of these aspects, but we want to look at, in the workplace, ways that we still engage employees so that they feel that they have meaningful work. I've got a study going on right now among university students, how they're engaging with AI in their workplaces. How do they feel about that engagement? Do they feel that they are being treated responsibly? Do they feel that they have still worth? How do they feel they're being recognized for their competence and any other kind of related aspects with their work life, if you will? And so, again, we need to understand that autonomy is important for individual human beings to be able to recognize their self-worth, but we also understand that there's going to be engagement with new processes, practices, and whatnot, including artificial intelligence aspects of their roles. Many of these students in this survey who have encountered AI in the very onset of interviewing for jobs have had interviews where they didn't even speak to a human being. I don't know if anyone else in this room has encountered that at this point, but what these students are saying is, how do I know I'm really being recognized for who I am? I'm giving mechanical responses to something that's prompting me to give responses, but how do I know that they really recognize my worth, me as a human individual, and what I can bring to the table? So those are things that are part and parcel of understanding empathy in terms of our practices. We have to engage and empower ethics, and I know ethics has been spoken about already this morning, but we need to look at who the individuals are that are impacted. We have folks that are definitely go-getters out there in business, They want to be top of their competence in terms of their role that they have or creating their new business or what have you. But they also need to be empathetic towards those that they're going to be encountering. Then we have people who are fence sitters. They kind of just sit back and wait to see what's going to happen next within the workplace. However, they're being prompted, maybe encouraged a bit more to be more diligent. AI can assist with that in some ways, in terms of prompting those processes or practices that those individuals might be engaging in. But again, it needs to be done with empathy. And finally, we could have adversarial roles that individuals take within a workplace. And those adversarial roles are ones of individuals who are ones that are looking for some way to tear down or adversely impact the practices or processes within a business organization. They can be a toxic individual potentially. Again, we need to look at how do we address that? Can these attributes be picked up in an interview process or an ongoing job analysis or evaluation each year when these adversarials are, using some sort of subversion in terms of having a little bit of power in their corner, if you will. So again, those are aspects as well. So what's important is understanding how we build teams that are ethical, but also demonstrating empathy. We need to also look at where we might find that AI has a pinch point, if you will, that we need to take into consideration as it might adversely impact our employees' morale and their sense of self-worth. So those are aspects that are very important as well to take into consideration. Let me see. I think I had, the other thing is, just think for a minute of an employee type. You all have encountered in some sort of employment context an employee type of person. But what do you think could potentially either enhance that person's performance in the workplace by showing empathy, or might degrade that performance because of a lack of showing empathy or a lack of human-to-human contact? So again, AI can enhance work practices and workplace processes, but we also have to look at what is the emotional impact as well. Okay. There can be conflicts in terms of clarification regarding how AI's role is being utilized and deployed within a workplace as it directly affects employees. We can see that in human resources. We could see it in a number of different other aspects in terms of the employee evaluations maybe at the end of each year, that sort of thing. We could see it affecting teams, if you will, in terms of their problem-solving processes and capabilities. As a manager, what do you think is the most effective way of achieving an empathetic outcome for your workplace? So a number of jobs need further job clarification in terms of duties, roles, et cetera, problem-solving aspects that need to be further explained. And there's a lot of other examples in terms of how we can look at empathetic employee outcomes for the workplace in terms of using things that have been tried and true, open book management. It also applies in a similar situation if we're employing or deploying AI in terms of doing evaluations on an annual basis, or some cases in a shorter period of time, somebody who is probationary employee. We can also use appreciative inquiry, asking employees, what are your thoughts about how we're engaging with you, your team, here at the organization? How has AI assisted you? How has AI been troublesome? How has it been a roadblock to you being effective in your role in this organization? So again, that openness and that demonstration of appreciation of employees' feedback is very, very important. Sometimes we do these daily performance huddles in workplaces, depending on the nature of the work. Get people together to talk about their concerns. One other aspect is reimagining what work looks like. There's a whole video there. If you want to take a photo of that, you can look at that video on your own time. But reimagining what work looks like. in today's world. And I think I'm just about at time, am I correct?
Yeah, sure, we can take up questions. or
Okay,
people
I'm going to
first.
leave that up just in terms of where does AI and empathy fit, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.